Welcome to Protea Weekly. It is mid-ish June already. The time just keeps moving. And I have the pleasure this week to be joined by Michelle. Michelle, welcome to Protea Weekly.
Thank you very much, Zane. It's been a while, but it's good to be back. Thank you.
Well, with that little sign above your head over there on air, it's like you'd be preparing your whole life for this.
I thought I'd come prepared this time. I've made some upgrades, so I'm glad you noticed.
I like the color. It's very on brand.
I'm glad you noticed that too. I'm very proud of it. It's like whether I'm here or at the office, feels like home.
And right there is sort of what we want to talk about today, right? We want to talk about belonging. And this, I feel like, is a very important topic to talk about, especially as that it is June, and June is Pride Month. And I want to start with just like a quote. And I'm going to read the quote and give me your first feelings to this. Okay.
Go ahead.
Pride Month is a reminder that great organizations are built on belonging. When people feel respected, valued, and empowered to be themselves, businesses benefit from stronger collaboration, better ideas, and a more connected culture.
Absolutely.
Why do you think this is the case?
yeah.
Why do you think, this ability to feel like you are you and you belong and you can be the person who you are makes such a big difference to the way people feel and the way they perform and the way they interact with their colleagues?
Okay, so obviously the caveat is it's my opinion, but when
On
I
this
think
on this channel, opinions are facts. So you just
Okay, yeah, I'll throw like the big disclaimer there, but I'll give it a crack. No, Zane, I think in terms of belonging, what you touched on now, it comes down to being yourself and what that opens up for you and for those around you. There is a lot of mental real estate taken up by having to, let's say, shy away from who you are or not necessarily being your true self, I think. And that's certainly one aspect. Apart from the fact that, it also just there's happiness that comes from it. If I can be who I am and I feel comfortable enough to be who I am in front of you, that already fosters sort of the groundwork for things like collaboration, which in the workspace is just so important. You find yourself being less guarded, more open to others as well. And I find it's quite a reciprocal sort of relationship and space that you find yourself in. So without that, there's a lot of hindrances, and ultimately that if someone is happy, they are naturally going to be more inclined to give their best, to want to be there, to want to show up every day.
what do you think stops people from just being who they are?
I mean, where do we start? I mean, just, I suppose it's rooted in fear of how you're going to be perceived. A lot of people have a lot of opinions, and I think that a lot of it comes from lack of understanding. And if someone feels that they are going to be misunderstood, I think that there's that block already where you're just not going to sort of expose that part of yourself, because therein lies the vulnerability. And I think it's very much human nature to shy away or to protect oneself from being too vulnerable and letting others see that, because that obviously opens you up to, there's a lot of hurt that can come from that. Definitely one of the main reasons I think is, fear of how they'll be perceived.
So I operate every day just like, hey, this is who I am. And this is just take it or leave it, very much. But I understand that I come from the ultimate point of privilege. Yeah. White, straight, male, right?
Sure.
Tick the boxes of privilege along the way. And
Absolutely.
I start thinking back, the other people that match my description a lot of the time do run into this. Just be yourself. It's not that difficult, right? That's the perception that a lot of people have there, where honestly, obviously, we're probably the ones creating most of this problem to start with, not to sort of degrade who I am. But when you've got a bit of privilege, it's hard for you to see past that privilege at times. And what would you tell people who are coming from this point of privilege or don't understand how difficult it can be for the average person to just be themselves and feel like they will be treated fairly, what would you say to those people? And what can they do to try and make people around them feel more comfortable?
I totally get where you're coming from, because I think, when you are coming from a point of privilege, and this applies to sort of any setting, when you don't understand something, I think it's so much harder to try and get to that point. And by that, I mean, it's like, yeah, just be yourself. But as you say, you're viewing it from your lens, and being yourself in the majority is obviously a lot easier. It's something that I've sort of grappled with for many years, this very question that you're asking. But for me, a lot of it is rooted in empathy and tapping into your empathy, because I think you can, for as much as we say one might not understand because they sort of aren't in that person's shoes, to me it's the same as, like, how do you find empathy? What do you do to be able to recognize that the next person might be in a tough spot? Because, let's say, from a socioeconomic perspective, I mean, there's many reasons why people are different, or sort of not in the mold, and where it would require empathy. Regardless, a tough question, but to perhaps start with understanding that it's okay that you don't get it. It's okay. It's okay that you don't fully understand. I think what I always say is, maybe just give it a little bit more thought, and from a place of kindness, perhaps think of it from a perspective of where you felt in a situation, for whatever reason, that you might be the outlier. What sort of led to those feelings? So, whilst it's not exactly the same, you can sort of look inwards and find a situation that you could apply.
Yeah, one of the things I try to remind myself all the time when I'm going through any situation, and it's hard, like I have to really catch myself, right? But everybody experiences life a little bit differently. And even if I go to the example of somebody that looks the same, sounds the same as me, we went to the same high school, had all the same opportunities, but we come out and we have two very different lives, right? Like, I just think back to some of the people I went to high school with. We looked the same, we went to the same classes, but here I am in the US running a company. They're not. Some of their lives are really tough. And you go, like, how does that happen? Right? We all had, these two people, me and this other person, had the same privileges, but our outcomes were very different. And because we don't know what happened before, we don't know what happened in that person's household, we don't know what experiences they've fallen into, what could have happened in their lives. And when you're thinking about any interaction with any person, you have to realize and understand that each person has experienced life in a slightly different way. And
Yeah,
and each one of those different experiences of a situation makes the outcomes in future. It's like, they talk about the butterfly effect, and one wing changes everything,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
this is building blocks. Everybody's building blocks, even though we might have been, in the same area. Our building blocks come together in a very different way. Not just the way we see it and experience it, but we also have free will where to put that in our experiences. I could take that situation where I was like the last person picked for the best sports team out there. Like,
yeah.
great, I was on the sports team. Now I could take that as oh my word, such a privilege. I might have been the last one in, but I'm still on the team. Or I could take it as, yeah, I'm on the best team, but I'm just like there to fill the gap, right? Like, I'm just in there. And
Bench
like,
warmer. Yeah,
just that little like experience and that my outlook on it can change the trajectory of the where I'm going, right? Like,
yeah,
the person who goes like, hey, I'm going to take this opportunity could go on to great things. The one who's like, oh, it's just a filler, won't work as hard, and all of a sudden it just collapses around them.
yeah.
And if you start thinking about life and people and the way they see life as all these little pieces that have come together in different types of ways, I think it becomes a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think I like that you mentioned that example in particular, because a lot of it, does come down to what is your worldview. And when I say worldview, I mean starting from within. Are you the glass half full or glass half empty sort of person? Because that 100% shapes what you do next and where you end up. I think, a lot of people, there's an existential crisis that comes from, let's say, a high school reunion or something like that. For that very reason, you're looking at it and you're like, well, we sort of had the same platforms where, or sort of starts where, or how, and we forget that the main key is everybody is different. And ironically enough, sort of in this month in particular, when we talk about celebrating differences and that's exactly it, is at the root of it all, everybody is different. And you just can't predict where one person might end up with the same opportunity. Yeah, like attracts like, and we do tend to gravitate. I mean, that's another aspect. We do tend to gravitate towards birds of a feather. And that's fair. I think that's also very inherent in our nature. I think that's also impedes or sort of acts as a roadblock sometimes to branching out and trying to understand sort of the different, because I think it is a lot easier to gravitate towards the same, if you want to call it that.
So why is this topic so important during Pride Month? Why is the sense of belonging so important?
I'll speak on your behalf here and say that I just know that it is so important to you always. It's something that, you foster at Protea, and it's sort of something that I've always, I remember we've had conversations like these in the past and many years ago, in fact, and I was thinking about as when this month comes around, you speak of coming from a point of privilege. Even for myself, I find myself in a very privileged position for that very reason, because I feel a sense of belonging. I oftentimes think, I can't quite imagine being in a space where that wasn't the case. I can't imagine how things would have turned out for me, because I can't tell you what it was or why I felt that way. But when I joined Protea, I was just myself, and I've never felt the need to be anybody else. And that sense of belonging to me is probably one of the things that I value most in life, because I know what a privilege it is. I can truly say, it might be something that many people take for granted, but for me, that is one of the biggest privileges that I experience, is that sense of belonging. So yes, in particular, this month shedding light on it, or just, I always think of it as just serving as a reminder that, yes, many people are different for many reasons, but are we doing what we can to make them feel included? And short of that, are we making sure that we're not going out of our way to exclude them? You know. So absolutely, sense of belonging, and certainly, this time of the year, it's just so important, because I come back to the original point of that sense of belonging is such a huge driver for happiness. And that's what we're after at the end of the day, right? In the spaces we occupy.
I appreciate those kind words. For me, it's always been pretty easy, right? People are people. And if I believe they're good people, like, I don't care about the rest, right? Like, do what you need to, like, have the weirdest, craziest hobbies, whatever you do in your personal life, like, just as long as it doesn't interfere with work, like, do whatever you want, right? To go watch the podcast, Watch Your An by John Garrett, and just see all the things that people get into and like their spare time. Like, everybody is so different, right? But at the same time, we're all just people, and we all want the same things at the end of the day. We all want to be happy. We all want to feel like we belong somewhere and there's some community. And at the end of the day, we all just want to be able to progress through our lives, have some highs along the way, and feel like things are moving in the right direction.
One of my favorite sayings, and quite simple actually, and it goes, at the end of the day, we're all just walking each other home. And that is, when you stop and think about it, everybody's doing their own thing and life is full of all sorts, but the human connection is so important and feelings included in anything. And if you think about it, you're on a team, put a bunch of people together and you see the camaraderie just sparks. People that you might not necessarily talk to all of a sudden couldn't be closer because you're working towards a common goal, and there's laughs along the way and you're getting to know that person. And that comes from that sense of belonging. You know, we're in this together. We're occupying this space together. So, I don't mean to laugh, but I mentioned, that I feel a huge sense of privilege, and your answer was exactly why. So I'm glad that I'm glad you mentioned that, because that just your sort of worldview is one of the reasons why I feel so privileged, because you really are whatever, and that's okay. Moving on, and I think that was what struck me in the beginning, because when you coming back to just okay, what sort of stops you from being yourself, and I mentioned fear, but on a sort of a deeper level and going sort of one layer beyond that, it's not just about fear of what are you going to think of who I am. It's that you will allow that to taint your view of who I am, because that is just one element. And that's what people forget. What makes you different, that is just one element of who you are. And oftentimes, with sort of where the spotlight goes, people tend to focus only on that difference. And I think that is where part of the fear comes from. It's like, hey, don't forget that, you actually think I'm a funny person, or as a silly example, or we actually get along really, really great. It's that fear that that one aspect will taint sort of you almost lose your sense of self in that moment, because you're like, that's not just who I am. I'm many things.
Okay, last question. In Pride Month, what would your message be to business leaders outside of Protea to make their work environments just a little bit more inclusive, where people feel comfortable, that they feel like they belong, that'll help that business take the next step forward and succeed?
Straight off the cuff, I'd have to say follow Zane Stevens as example, and it's
Terrible
and
advice.
this isn't paid for, by the way. I'm not getting anything in return. I should put that disclaimer. This isn't paid for promotion. Zane, it's start by taking the time, insofar as possible, to know your people, because a lot of it's in plain sight. People want to show, for as much as people shy away for fear and whatever reason, read between the lines. People want to be known. I wish you'd want to get to know me. Find yourself in that space, and also just letting people know that it's just okay. I mean, we recently, and if I may say, I mean, I'm just thinking about the carbon balance and culture in particular. What are we doing? What are we doing that fosters this environment? It's not loud. It's not grandiose. You're not standing there with a megaphone saying, this is what we need to subscribe to. A lot of it is leading by example, because if I'm having a conversation with you and you are revealing, I think, and that's how it came about between you and I. It could have been on an unrelated topic where you were just talking about people are people to you. And I saw that and I was like, hey, hold on. Okay, by the way, Zane, let's test that theory. And so it's difficult, I think, because I think it's something that's very inherent, and I count myself lucky to sort of be in this space. But more than anything, it's living by example and showing who you are as a leader, and what you stand for.
Okay, I'm going to end this off by telling you, everybody, that you need to remember that people are people, and their differences should not scare you. You should embrace the differences of your people, because that experience those lived moments bring new outlooks to your business and help you overlook the blind spots that you will have because of your lived experience. And if you cultivate all those lived experiences, what people have gone through, and listen to them when they tell you something, if it doesn't feel right, maybe this isn't the right direction to go and it's going to have a negative effect. And if you truly pay attention, listen to people, and make adjustments when they talk up, you will have a team that trusts you. You have a team that will work harder for you, and you'll have a culture where people want to be around and succeed together. Michelle, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Zane. I appreciate it.